All right, so we're discussing the Modern Warfare 2 beta, and the question I want to ask, because obviously rebooting Modern Warfare is trying to project this in some sense, is that having played it, do you guys feel that the glory days of the Xbox Live era might be on the way back, or is this just another shooter in the marketplace?
I think it's another Call of Duty. I don't necessarily think it's going to bring back the old days of like MW2 and 360. In part, that's because of what the game is. I don't think the game is trying to do that. And also, we're living in a different time, and shooters are different than what they were then. Call of Duty was the thing back then. It is not anymore. It is a thing, but it is a fine Call of Duty. But I don't think it's a return to those days.
Yeah, I had an overall good experience, but it did feel very much like we're jumping back into a new, slightly updated, slightly refined Call of Duty multiplayer experience. The tweaks that have been added, I personally liked, but I didn't come away feeling like, oh, it's the new golden age of Call of Duty. It was just a lot of fun, but it wasn't exactly like a revolutionary experience.
If Call of Duty is just another shooter in the mix now, then is it really Call of Duty at all? Because, like, as Sharif sort of pointed out, like back in the day, Call of Duty was the thing, right? It was like you had a couple of shooters jostling for everyone's attention, and it was a toss-up between Halo or Call of Duty. And now it's like online shooters, just there's so many of them that nobody really gets to have that massive, like, penetrative audience anymore, right?
Well, I would say in its own corner, it's still pretty dominant. Like Halo Infinite is pierced and no one cares. This Modern Warfare 2 open beta was a lot of fun, and while some people had some issues, it did really feel like a core Call of Duty experience. If you like Call of Duties, you still got exactly what you wanted. It still had a similar pace. It still had like similar systems around it that players have grown to love and get used to. Albeit with some changes that some people found weren't super hype with. But in terms of where it stands in the marketplace, obviously it's a multiplayer shooter. So it's not exactly the same kettle of fish as like Apex Legends or the Battle Royale shooters, which are super popular today. It's still trying to do, at least in terms of the multiplayer, its own thing. And I do still think it has lots of merit in that space, especially compared to some of its competitors, which seem to have recently dropped the ball. I mean, I mentioned Halo, but also Battlefield's kind of on the floor as well.
Jeez.
So, like, it's doing great comparatively.
As a Battlefield fan, I'm very happy. There are a couple things here. Like, first, it is telling that the most popular thing and the thing that everyone is excited about is the new Warzone, because the original Warzone was so big, not specifically Call of Duty multiplayer as you understand it. So Call of Duty is relevant. It's still big, but not in the same way that it used to. And I think beyond its own individual sort of bubble, the market is just so more diverse and bigger that you just can't have a game like Call of Duty. Like even Fortnite, PUBG, remember all those games, they had their heyday and then they trail off and then they just become another thing. In a year from now, another game is going to pop up. Maybe, someone's going to figure out the extraction royale thing that Tarkov has been doing, going to popularize that in a way and make it big, and then it's going to trail off. And then someone else is going to come around. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff is happening that you can have all these individual games doing well for themselves, not super leading the pack, dominating the zeitgeist type of well, but still doing their own thing, succeeding, and continuing on. I think this is just a better world for games.
And in terms of Call of Duty itself, within that Call of Duty bubble, what does Modern Warfare 2 bring? Like, are people going to be tempted to just stick with Warzone, or?
Yeah, I think the people who like Warzone will try out the new Warzone. It's coming out 2 weeks after the multiplayer, which I feel like is such a short period of time between multiplayer that it almost feels like the multiplayer is like, whatever, everyone cares about Warzone. We're just going to have this, give them to train their thumbs and hands, and then, we'll get you to the real action. That said, Warzone 2, so far at least, looks like to be bringing a bunch of core changes, which I like, as someone who did not vibe well with the original Warzone because of those changes. So maybe those people will be sticking to Warzone 1, I don't know. I doubt it will be that much different, considering they want everyone to move on to the new thing, and that will be the platform going forward. But in terms of Call of Duty multiplayer, there's just not a lot of new here. Like my biggest thing with Call of Duty is that they tend to stick to their core formula in an annoyingly rigid way. that it almost seems criminal to challenge any of these staples, and they tend to have to stick everything in the same pot, even when it doesn't make sense. And I really hate that about it. Like, kill streaks, for example. I despise kill streaks. I've always said that about kill streaks. I never liked them. But kill streaks make sense in a TDM mode, in an FFA, in your multiplayer. Why do you need kill streaks in a Battlefield-like mode like Ground War? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you want to incentivize players to do something, and yet you're telling them, sit here and aim your sights, mount, and just get kills. Like, that goes against the thing that you're trying to get people to incentivize. So that mode ends up playing just like the other modes. And then, okay, search and destroy, and they have two no respawn modes. There's the one where you get the bag of money, and then the one where you transport the prisoner. It's like, okay, we're trying to do Rainbow Six Siege here. Oh, wait, let me call in an airstrike. Like, what are we doing? Like, why do you need all these ingredients in the same thing? You can have a bunch of servings on the table for a bunch of different people. You don't need to have everything in the same plate. And so that really makes this experience pretty much the same as Modern Warfare in 2019, which a lot of things moving in one direction, in the realistic, weighty, super serious, high recoil department. And then the other side is like people bunny hopping around corners and people calling in kill streaks. And it's like, okay, like you just made another Call of Duty. Good on you.
It's a blessing and a curse in a way, because on one hand, if you really like Call of Duty, it's just Call of Duty again, with some slight changes. The downside of that is that if you find Call of Duty nowadays kind of middling, you're getting largely the same experience, like was just said. For what it's worth, a lot of the smaller, sort of like weirder multiplayer changes I really like, although I don't think they're like massive, bombastic, alterations to the formula. I love hanging off ledges, which you can do in this game.
Yes.
I love the quick pistol swap of your primary. So there's like some attachment, we think, where if you have an assault rifle and a pistol secondary, you can quickly swap out and you can like hold your main gun sort of on the side and pull your pistol out quickly.
They have made it so, remember that quote from MW2 tutorial where it said, remember, switching to your sidearm is always faster than reloading.
Yeah.
They have made it actually true in 2022, like that actually switching to your sidearm is always faster than reloading.
Yeah.
Because the reloads are now staged, which is another feature they added, which is basically means that the reload will pick up from where it left off, roughly. Which is pissing off a lot of Call of Duty players, and I love to see that, because they used to do like they start a reload and then they hit the switch weapon button. They call it YY cancel because it's a relic from the 360 era where the Y button is the switch weapon button. So you hit it twice. You can either cancel the reload or interrupt it if you get cornered and you need to do it. But now, if you do that, you just go back. He's just like, oh, I already removed the magazine. Let me bring up the other magazine. Let me slot it in and let me hit the thing. And it's like, okay, like that, I just got me killed. And I'm like, good. Like, that's fine. Like, it's a weapon. You're playing a shooter. You picked the wrong time to reload and you got killed. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go on, Connor, sorry.
No, you're totally right. See, I love small changes like that. I love, like, hanging off ledges and picking people off with pistols. But is this going to totally, like, revitalize and refresh the Call of Duty experience? No. It's just a cool quirk that this game has. It's a cool, fun thing you can try out. And I'm sure some players will do some wacky things with it. But, I mean, yeah, it feels very familiar. I love the pace of it. I love how quickly people go down in the beta and like how quickly you can take people out. In terms of the guns they had, all of them are really good, apart from I think one LMG is kind of naff, but everything else seemed really good. Like, I don't know. It's a sort of thing that, you finish work, you build it up and you kind of chill out and you play a few games, which is certainly what I always liked about Call of Duty. And I think that's what a lot of people always liked about Call of Duty. But in terms of its wider appeal, it is bringing the same sort of package that you'd expect.
Just from talking to the two of you, I'm getting the impression that Modern Warfare 2's multiplayer is more or less a concession to tradition rather than something that's really needed in a world where, like, all the big shooters are basically free-to-play things. Call of Duty has its own one of those. It feels like this is a muddled experience for a start, like Sharif was saying, but also would it be fair to say that it's going to struggle to find a place, or that its place is fairly niche?
They have sort of tried to appeal to everybody by doing Warzone, which is a free-to-play thing. And you can tell some of the mechanics that people hate in multiplayer were mainly designed with the big mode in mind. They don't quite make sense in the arcade. We're running around a playground 6 versus 6, and that kind of had a bad or a poor reflection on the multiplayer. So yeah, they're trying to appeal to a bunch of people, and I don't think they're really wowing anybody. Like if you like the Modern Warfare 2019, you're pretty much going to like this. It's a slower paced Call of Duty. A lot of people mounting, a lot of people popping, stopping and popping. Not quite the adrenaline-fueled Treyarch game, not quite Vanguard, where it's just chaos everywhere, especially if you played the Blitz playtest.
Yeah.
That's still the same game. If you didn't like that thing that they did in Modern Warfare 2019, you are not going to like this. They still have the same, their mind made up about the minimap changes. People are not going to show up on that minimap. You need a UAV. Like, that's non-negotiable at that point. Like, this is the game they're making, so you're either on board or not. Warzone, this is the thing that's still up in the air. Like, are they going to go more BR-like and then appear to a different group of people, or are they going after the same people who like the original Warzone, were like, I'm going to call in my loadout and basically invalidate the entire point of the VR? I don't know. We don't know. Apparently, they have changed some of that based on feedback, but I don't know how much of that is going to actually be in the final game. Are they maybe going to have two different modes, like true BR, where you pick up your loot, and bullshit BR, where you just call in your multiplayer loadout? You can tell I'm very enthusiastic about the original Warzone.
Well, there's an interesting relationship between Warzone and, Call of Duty multiplayer now, where I think I align with a lot of people out there, where I just used Vanguard multiplayer to level up guns that I would use in Warzone, which I don't know what that says about Call of Duty multiplayer, that a core number of the Warzone player base see it as kind of like a grinding tool to get their weapons geared out and decked out the attachments
Just
they want.
doing a bunch of bullshit to push a number up. That's video games 101, isn't it?
It's really interesting. Like, for example, in the multiplayer beta, there's a thing called Dead Silence, which basically silences your footstep. And it's kind of like it was a menace in Warzone, and now when you activate it in the multiplayer beta, there's a big noise it makes, so people can basically find out that you've used it before you suddenly run up and shoot them and stuff like that. That feels to me like, I can't speak to how much of a nightmare that was in multiplayer in Vanguard, but in like that screams to me as a Warzone change that's kind of bled its way into Call of Duty multiplayer. And doesn't really quite make sense, because like in a super fast-paced 6v6, that silent footstep thing, while frustrating, isn't necessarily as game ruining or maybe as frustrating as it was in this massive Warzone Battle Royale experience. I don't know what the longevity of the Modern Warfare multiplayer will be. I tend to believe that it's a pretty good entry from what I've played. It seems pretty fun. But yeah, in terms of its relationship to Warzone and whether or not people are just going to use it as like a ranking up tool, I don't know. But for what it's worth, it's fun.
When I played Warzone when it came out, the original Warzone, I called it an ad for Call of Duty. Like, I didn't think it was like a mode that could exist on its own. Like, it was, I think, tied to the yearly game in such a way that it just had no identity, where it was like, what is the flavor of the week thing? Oh, it's the weapon from that Call of Duty. How do I get that? Well, you have to pay for it to, or you could just pick it up on the floor and just spend, 50 hours grinding it in Warzone, which is not a high kill thing. So you're probably going to just end up getting the game and playing shipment 24/7 and just leveling up the thing that you want for that other game. So to me, that existed like, it just existed as an ad. Like, it's just like a game should be on its own. It should be like, it should not be tied to another thing. But I think judged on its own, like the multiplayer changes that they have made specifically for 6v6 and the new ground war and the new invasion, those things are fun, self-contained enough that they're, if you like, again, MW 2019, you're going to like this. They have made some concessions here and there. The maps are less porous. They are a little bit more predictable in their design, which was a problem that the original game suffered from greatly, and it exacerbated a lot of the design changes they made around movement and gunplay. Here, they maintain the movement, they maintain the gunplay, but there are not 6,000 angles that you can get shot from. So that makes it a little easier to enjoy those changes. They canceled they removed the slide canceling, which makes it a little easier to track people, especially on controller. But people are now trying to jump around corners, which is an old Call of Duty thing. I don't know if they're going to touch that in the beta. So it's always like, it's a give and take approach. Like it's but it's nothing revolutionary. You're still going to do the same thing. It's like, oh, it's going to be a little bit of a different flavor. I personally like the Infinity Ward Call of Duties because I think they lean better towards my sensibilities. but people just break them, which makes me really sad. Because I was like, okay, can we have just a standard like shooter where people shoot and not people fucking dolphin diving and bunny hopping, because it just breaks the immersion for me? We cannot, because that game does not exist. Until that game exists, I will play whatever Infinity Ward gives me, I guess.
What you mentioned at the start of this chat about it, whether or not this game feels like classic Golden Age Call of Duty. Yeah, people jumping around corners and like crouching in rooms and camping. It feels a lot like classic Call of Duty like that.
Yeah,
I guess it feels a lot like in terms of what people are doing. Like, I get a pang of nostalgia when I see someone crouched in a corner of a shotgun, or people literally busting down doors and leaping across the room, as opposed to slide cancelling everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't think I didn't come away feeling like anything was like a deal breaker for me. There are aspects that are a bit, but like overall, it kind of worked as a hype generator, which is pretty much what the open beta was, right? It's kind of like a big get excited moment.
I guess my last question is it worth $70 billion to get this on the Game Pass?
Yes. I think I don't think this game is going to be coming out on Game Pass, just to clarify to the folks listening. This game specifically. But in the future, yes, Call of Duty as a Game Pass game would be perfect, because it's like, I'm sorry to say this to the people who work hard on it, it's disposable. It is a thing that you play and not think about. And it's designed to be that way. It is not the thing that you talk to people, you know, in Discord chat, that you have a thing with 6 people that you play with and talk about strategy. It's not Tarkov. It is not, you know, even something like, it's not Destiny where you're talking about raid stuff. It's disposable. It's the thing that you just play, you move on with your life. You level up your shit, you get your cannons, you move on with your life. Yeah. And a game like that for Game Pass, absolutely. Like, I don't want to have to pay $70 to play that for like 50 hours a year. That doesn't seem like a good ratio to dollar or whatever. So yeah, I totally get into Game Pass. Jim Ryan can suck it.
And what a great deal for Warzone players, right? Like, you just pay a Game Pass subscription, and then you just unlock all the new guns, and you can just jump in and grind whatever you want out. It's like you're paying a subscription to like farm, farm XP. It's just like, it's like you're playing WoW again, basically. But
maybe WoW itself will be on Game Pass, Connor.
Ooh. But yeah, like, I think it would be a good Game Pass inclusion for pretty much the exact same reasons as just mentioned. I feel like Vanguard makes more sense as sort of a game you don't just drop a whole lot of money for, because that game was something special.
So it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's fun enough and potentially worth the budget of a small country to get it onto Game Pass.
Yeah,
that sounds like an endorsement to me.
Call of Duty's fun. Like, if nothing else, it's fun. I just want to say one last thing to Battlefield fans who have been forced to roam the lands of the shooter sphere in search of the same hit. I'm sorry, folks. You're not going to find it here. Ground War is not it. Invasion is not it. But you can have fun with those things on their terms. If you understand that, and if you try not to make it Battlefield, you're going to have an okay time. Go in expecting this to be balanced like Battlefield. It won't be. Go in expecting it to play like Battlefield. It will not. It is not designed to be Battlefield, which is fascinating to me, because they have all the fucking tools and they're not interested in making the Battlefield thing. They're just interested in making another thing that's Call of Duty. So once you understand that, you're going to have a good time.
Well, that's a box quote, isn't it? Prepare for an okay time.
Well, for Battlefield people specifically, because I know the hurt.
Like and subscribe and all that, I mean, if you want, I'm not your mum. And check out the weekly VG 24/7 Best Games Ever podcast if you quite like listening to people mugging off their boss. I should probably stop doing that, actually.